just like that, it's week 4 of the 2025 fantasy football season, so you know exactly what we need to do. We're going to go through every single matchup, go over every single running back, and go over who you should be starting and who you should be sitting in week 4 of the fantasy season. All right, let's kick the video off with Thursday Night Football. We have the Seahawks traveling to face the Cardinals. Let's start with the Seahawks side of things. Another good fantasy day in week 3 for Kenneth Walker. 18 fantasy points, 38 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, and 1 catch for 12 receiving yards. I mean, wasn't incredibly efficient or anything, but he scored 2 touchdowns, so we'll take it for fantasy purposes. Had a nice week 2 with 18.8 fantasy points. Worth noting that, obviously, Zach Charbonnet missed this past week, so a little bit of increase in volume, but also, still was able to get 18.8 fantasy points with Charbonnet having a good amount of volume in week 2. So the time I'm recording this, don't know if Charbonnet is going to play this week. It is a short week and everything, but I think Kenneth Walker absolutely needs to be a start for you guys. The Cardinals have really struggled against the run this year, giving up the 25th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So even on a short week, Thursday Night Football, love the spot for Kenneth Walker. If Charbonnet plays, I mean, he's always startable, has some standalone value, but I would say with his first game back coming off an injury, definitely don't be going out of your way to put Zach Charbonnet in your starting lineup unless you're absolutely desperate. But it is a good matchup here. We should expect a close divisional game here, and obviously this Clint Kubiak system for the Seahawks are going to run the football first and foremost. So definitely like Walker a lot more, but Charbonnet always has start ability, for lack of a better term. Okay, no James Conner. He suffered that gruesome ankle injury. He is out for the rest of the 2025 season, so that is presumably leaving Trey Benson as the starting running back for the Cardinals. And this is a good matchup. I mean, once again, another bottom 12 unit against the running back position in terms of fantasy points allowed in the Seahawks defense, which is not a bad defense, but they've not been playing great against the run. I do want to say, I think Trey Benson is very startable. He's sitting at 59% roster at the time I'm recording this. That number is going to move up pretty dramatically through this waiver period, but I just won't be surprised if we get a little bit of involvement out of Amari DeMarcado. I don't think that Bam Knight, the only other running back on the roster at the moment, is going to have any impact here. But all I'm going to say is I won't be surprised if DeMarcado gets involvement and or if they bring up another running back from the practice squad or something. It's Trey Benson's opportunity, 110%. But be ready for some disappointment, especially on a short week. And we have to look at this Cardinals offense and really look at the play calling and scheme right now. It's not like a super fluent offense. It's just not. So I don't want the Trey Benson week 4 hype to get too crazy. I think he's definitely startable, but I just don't want you guys to get too crazy with it. It definitely depends on who else is on your roster. And don't forget, these Thursday Night Football matchups can get a little wonky, can get a little weird. So, hey, Benson should be picked up, should be rostered, but definitely depends on who you guys have on your roster before you guys just cement him in as a true RB2 for your fantasy rosters in week 4. All right, moving into Sunday's action, we're going to get an early game this week. Our first international game of the year will be the Vikings and Steelers. So let's start with the Vikings side of things. Jordan Mason was one of my must-start players in week 3, a player that made the nuclear video, a player that I told you guys to go try and buy low before. He has a good day against a bad Bengals run defense. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, 116 yards on the ground, 7.2 yards per carry, 23.6 fantasy points with no Aaron Jones in the mix. And in terms of this backfield, I mean, we barely saw any involvement to anybody else, just a couple touches to Cam Akers, but it's obvious that Jordan Mason is the guy here. And the Steelers, run defense is fine. They're certainly not fantastic. 13th against the run. I mean, they're not bad, don't get me wrong. So this is still a good enough spot that if you own Jordan Mason, he's a clear workhorse running back here. Carson Wentz, presumably starting for the Vikings again in week 4, is going to have to rely on this run game getting established. So still really like Jordan Mason. He's a strong RB2 this week. And, I've really been, content with Jaylen Warren over the past 2 weeks or so, encouraging you guys just to leave him in your starting lineup. I don't know how crazy high the upside is for Jaylen Warren, but he's had 13 or more fantasy points in every game so far on the season. So I think Jaylen Warren is just a solid start, good RB2. The Vikings, another one of these teams, are top 10 against the run, but still, like, these international games, every year. I feel like it's either a lot of defense or a lot of offense, or like the defense holds up for like 3/4 and collapses at the end of the game. So once again, these international games can get a little weird. I wouldn't really overthink the rankings too much here going into week 4 for this matchup. I just think that Jordan Mason and Jaylen Warren are both very solid starts as we approach week 4. All right, moving into the early afternoon window for Sunday's action, we are going to have the Washington Commanders traveling to face the Atlanta Falcons. Definitely an interesting mix of teams here. So let's start with the Commanders side of things. It's kind of a weird game to look at because, no Jaden Daniels in week 3. And Marcus Mariota did get some volume running the football still, which is good because JD5 is still going to get, some volume, and he's actually in the game. So it does allow us to look at the backfield here with a little bit more clarity, but this was also our first matchup with no Austin Eckler. And yeah, there's some clarity here, but not really. Like Bill, 8 touches, scored a touchdown, 10 fantasy points, had a catch. Chris Rodriguez had 11 rushing attempts for 39 rushing yards. Then Jeremy McNichols only had 4 touches, but he had the big breakaway touchdown run, finished with 13.8 fantasy points. And for reference, Mariota had 6 rushing attempts, 8 rushing touchdown, and 40 rushing yards. So that doesn't really help us in terms of our week 4 evaluations with what to do with this backfield. But I would say for the most part, this is a tough matchup against the Falcons, 6th fewest fantasy points opposing running backs. And on the road here, for the most part, I want to avoid the Commanders' backfield. I don't really know if this is going to be a good situation on a week-to-week basis for fantasy football. Like, obviously, there's some players here who are startable, but I think it's going to be very tough to call. This is a backfield by committee. So I'm not in love, especially on the road in this matchup with the Washington Commanders running backs this week. And I know you're probably going to see, Jeremy McNichols is 12% rostered. Rodriguez is 10% rostered. I would assume those guys will go up in roster percentages, but when are you able to trust these guys? I just don't like this situation. And once again, the quarterback is going to get, some rushing attempts here as well, whether it is JD5 or Mariota. So I think JCM is startable, and I don't know. It could be any of the other running backs here. I just don't love the situation. And then they get the Chargers next week. They will face the Bears and the Cowboys in the following 2 weeks, which is not bad at all. But I just don't know from a fantasy perspective how much we can really trust this backfield going into the week. I'll leave it at that. Bijan Robinson, you have to continue rolling with 16.1 fantasy points in the blowout loss to the Panthers. Still at 72 yards on the ground, 5.5 yards per carry, and 5 receptions as well. Tyler Algier, very limited volume in this week 3 matchup, but he's still a solid handcuff. The Commanders have been very good against the run, so I don't love this matchup for Bijan Robinson, but it doesn't really matter. It's Bijan Robinson. You start him every single week, no matter what. Still a must-start running back here in week 4. Moving along, we're going to have the Chargers traveling to face the Giants, and some updates in terms of both of these backfields. Injuries, right? But let's start with the Chargers side of things. Finally, a big week from rookie running back Omarion Hampton. 24.9 fantasy points, 70 yards on the ground, a rushing touchdown, and I think most importantly, 7 targets, 6 catches, 59 receiving yards. Did have a fumble, but it's okay. It wasn't a lost fumble, and still a very good fantasy stat line. If you guys held out the faith, if you guys bought low on him, whatever it may be, you're feeling good right now, and you have to feel even better because he did that against a Denver Broncos defense that has been pretty poor against the run, honestly, but still a good defense. And this week he's getting the Giants, who rank bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to running back. So even if Hampton had a bad game in week 3, let's say, I would still have him as a start because this matchup's too good to ignore. But yeah, this Greg Roman offense, they've really been throwing a lot through the first 3 games of the season. And actually, Justin Herbert threw the football 47 times in week 3, a season high. And we still saw very good involvement out of Hampton on the ground. And then now we have Najee Harris, feared to have suffered an Achilles injury, presumably out for the season, so he's not going to be taking away any potential volume. His volume is starting to ramp up a little bit. It's Hampton's backfield. There's going to be somebody else here as an RB2, whether it's Hassan Haskins or somebody else, but they're not going to be fantasy relevant. This is Hampton's backfield to run away with. It's a smash matchup. He is a must-start running back here in week 3. And then on the flip side, for the Giants, we have an injury to Tyrone Tracy. He is expected to miss some time. So we have another rookie running back in Cam Scatabo, who is in line to just run away with this backfield. As porous as the Giants' offense has been, it didn't really matter in week 3, right? 24 fantasy points for Scatabo. He had 13.9 against the Cowboys the week before, but in week 3, 60 yards on the ground, a rushing touchdown. And once again, I think most importantly, 8 targets, 6 catches, 61 receiving yards. So I don't really know what the future holds in terms of the starting quarterback for the Giants, but you got to feel good no matter what about Scatabo's involvement in week 3 and the fact that Tyrone Tracy is out of the mix. But I will say that Devin Singletary, I mean, he had 4 touches this past week. He is a running back who can get some sort of involvement. Eric Gray is currently sitting on the PUP list. So I would just imagine it's going to be Scatabo and Singletary going into week 4, but maybe somebody else gets added here or pulled up from the practice squad. But still, it looks like it's all Scatabo right now. Home game for the Giants. This offense does not look good. The defense does not look good. But Scatabo is going to be involved either way, so you got to feel good if you guys do own Cam Scatabo. 2 rookie running backs in this matchup that I think are absolute solid starts, must-start running backs here in week 4. Moving along, we got the Titans traveling to face the Texans. And, I don't know, guys. I don't really feel so enthusiastic about this matchup for the running back position. I think Tony Pollard's startable. 13.9 fantasy points in week 3. Did score his first touchdown in the season. That was nice to see. Had 2 receptions, 2.8 yards per carry. I mean, this Titans offense just looks absolutely anemic. I mean, I guess Cam Ward is at least thrown a touchdown in each of the last 2 games, finally threw for more than 175 passing yards this past week. But yeah, I mean, the Texans are such a weird team to look at because the front 7's pretty good. They're good at getting after the quarterback, but the offense has been awful. They're just creating really gross game scripts. They do rank relatively low, bottom 10 against the running back position in terms of fantasy points allowed. So it's a good enough matchup. Pollard's startable, but I just don't know what the real upside is just based on the offense that he's playing in. So startable, good matchup. We'll leave it at that. Nick Chubb, Woody Marks, whoever you believe in, Dameon Pierce in terms of the Texans backfield. Dameon Pierce missed this past week, right? I don't even know. I still have a Darway Gunbawale on the screen. He's basically just playing special teams. So it's really just Chubb and Woody Marks. And once again, just no true upside due to the fact of the nature of the offense that they're playing in. I mean, they get the Titans this week. It's not a bad matchup whatsoever. So if you own Nick Chubb, you're desperate for an RB2, you're desperate for a flex play. Sure, maybe he has a week similar to week 2 where he scampers into the end zone and gets you a solid stat line. But generally speaking here, I'm just staying away from the Texans backfield because I'm not a big fan of this offense. But they're at home. It's a good enough matchup. I won't be surprised if Chubb scores and gets you 12, 15 fantasy points. So he's maybe startable, but I just don't really see any real upside. And I'm expecting, last week I called, the Jags-Texans game just to be a gross, low-scoring affair, and I could see that happening again with the Titans and Texans. But then again, the Titans just got absolutely torched this past week, so we'll find out. But yeah, just once again, I don't see a lot of upside in this matchup for you guys, unfortunately, at running back. Next up, we have the Eagles traveling to face the Buccaneers. Should be a great matchup. 2-3-0 teams. So let's start with the Eagles side of things. A down week for Saquon Barkley, 9.5 fantasy points. A game script where we really saw the Eagles need to throw the football. And I think, fortunately for us, actually threw the football. That's what was missing through the first 2 weeks of the season, it felt like. And I do think ultimately, while it maybe hurt Barkley's stat line and fantasy in week 3, as the season progresses, if this team can both run and throw the football and run at the quarterback, so I guess 3 aspects here, that is good, I think, for Saquon Barkley long-term on the season. But yeah, didn't score a touchdown this past week, just 4 catches, 9 receiving yards, and the game script did not benefit him. The Eagles were in absolute, go mode and needed to throw the football a lot, and actually got guys like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith involved. But nonetheless, here it's Saquon Barkley. You start him every single week, and don't be panicking about this past week. It's not an awful matchup. The Bucs have given up the 18th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, so they're kind of right there on the outside looking in terms of being okay, but certainly not good. So yeah, I mean, come on. It's Barkley. You're not going to bench him anyway, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. Bucky Irving, still solid every single week. Going to be a very good start for you guys. I know a lot of people look at this Eagles defense and get a little squeamish. They are a top 12 unit against the running back position. That's fine. It's still Bucky Irving. You still got to start him every single week. He's giving you double digits through the first 3 games of the season, and I don't really see that changing even against a good Eagles defense. Rachaad White, a sit for me. Definitely worth rostering. I know maybe we got a little excited after week 2. He had pretty solid involvement, and he could do that any week. It's just going to be very difficult to call. Sean Tucker really just playing on special teams right now. So this one, let's just keep it basic, simple. Barkley, start. Bucky, start. Everybody else, a sit in week 4. All right, moving along here, we will have the Panthers traveling to face the Patriots, and I think Chuba Hubbard is still in the start category. I know, kind of disappointed this past week with 9.6 fantasy points. And you would have expected the way that game script went, right, that maybe Chuba got a bit more involvement because the Panthers were just absolutely beating up on the Falcons. And I guess maybe I'm being a little bit harsh in terms of that evaluation because he did get a lot of involvement. I mean, he had 17 touches, which was the most on the season so far, and still 3 targets, 2 catches. Just didn't score a touchdown. If he had scored a touchdown, we'd all be feeling fine. He had 17 or more fantasy points in each of his first 2 starts on the season. And because of the way the game script was going, we got the most involvement yet out of Rico Dowdle. And he actually got a lot of goal line work and did score a touchdown. And I don't think that'll necessarily be the case on the road here against New England in week 4. Maybe, but yeah, I think that this is a good spot for Chuba Hubbard. The Patriots haven't been great. They are bottom 10 against the running back position in fantasy, so I like this spot a lot for Chuba. Don't overreact too much to this past week. I think this will be a more competitive game in week 4 and a good spot for Chuba. Rico Dowdle, I still think is like a solid handcuff. If something happens to Chuba, Rico is going to be the next man up. We know that. We saw him have a decent year with the Cowboys last year as a starter, so still think he's a good handcuff, but yeah, don't overreact to the goal line usage. That game was completely out of hand in week 3. All right, the Patriots running backs, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I want nothing to do with this backfield. Like, if you own Travion Henderson, keep riding it out. I absolutely think he is worth rostering and all of that, but he's not worth starting anytime soon. I mean, this past week, 4 touches, 3 targets to Stevenson, 11 touches, 3 targets to Henderson, and Antonio Gibson had 7 touches. And like, you go back to week 2, it's just as convoluted as week 3 was. I mean, Stevenson did have the 2 fumbles. Antonio Gibson had a fumble. So like, yes, that's good if you're bullish on Travion Henderson, but who in the world knows what Mike Vrabel is going to do at the running back position here in week 4? You just can't trust it. And the Panthers have been better against the run than you might think. They're kind of right there in the middle, 17th most fantasy points to opposing running backs thus far on the season. So bear that in mind, I guess. I mean, they're not like a bottom 5 unit like they were, consistently all season long last year, and how they looked, very early week 1 into the season against the Jags. So I wouldn't feel confident starting any of these guys. If you're absolutely super desperate in a deeper format, Henderson would be the choice, but yeah, I still don't trust this backfield as we approach week 4. Next up, we have the Saints traveling to face the Bills. Let's start with the Saints side of things. Alvin Kamara, I think, still needs to be a start. I know this past week was disappointing. 6.6 fantasy points in a decent spot against the Seattle Seahawks. 42 yards on the ground, still at 18 touches, 2 targets in this game. So pretty nice involvement. I guess worth noting, we saw the most usage out of Kendre Miller yet on the season, but I just wouldn't react too much here. I mean, the Saints were getting blown out early in this game. They lost 44-13. The game script did not benefit Alvin Kamara, and a lot of times you'll see, the RB2 get some more volume as a game like this starts to go on. So no panic here for me if you own Alvin Kamara. It just wasn't a good week for him. And this Bills defense is still not good against the run. I mean, they've improved slightly over the past week or so, but they still come in 18th in terms of fantasy points allowed. So I think it's still a good spot for Kamara. Like, this is what he's going to be this year. He's a low-end RB2 who still has some upside, but, Spencer Rattler and this offense at times is going to hold him back. So good enough spot, but I will say I do think that there is the potential here that the Bills get up ahead in this game. I mean, the Bills are at home here. much better offense. This defense is not going to be able to compete with the Bills. So maybe we do see more of a similar game script to last week for the Saints, but tough to bench a guy like Kamara. Maybe depends on who's on your roster. James Cook, this is a beautiful spot. I mean, come on. He gets the Saints defense this week. They're 26 against opposing running backs. He's getting a great amount of volume. He's scoring touchdowns. He's picking up exactly where he left off last year. He's the RB3 in PPR scoring right now, looking like a draft day steal for anybody who overlooked him or was worried about a potential trade and holdout and the contract. I mean, touchdown regression, whatever your excuse was for not drafting James Cook, you're feeling pretty dumb right now. He is a smash start here in week 4 of the season. All right, to wrap up the early window, we're going to have the Browns traveling to face the Lions. Let's start with the Browns side of things. Certainly an interesting backfield at the moment. Quentin Junkins, 16.5 fantasy points against a good Packers defense in week 3. Once again, efficient on the ground, 5.2 yards per carry at 6.1 yards per carry in week 2. Scored a touchdown, I know it was the end of the game, but had 18 total touches. I think you got to feel pretty good if you own Junkins. It's not the greatest matchup against a good Lions run defense, although I'm recording this before Monday Night Football. I have a feeling their ranking will slide a little bit further back, being that they're facing Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson tonight, but yeah, I mean, you look at the volume for the Browns backfield, like Dylan Sampson's basically out of the mix. I thought he could hold on to like a pass catching type role, but Jerome Ford basically took that over in week 3, which is weird. But Junkins is the guy here who's getting the volume. So yeah, fire him up. He's a solid start. Not the greatest matchup once again here. They're on the road. The Browns can get into situations quickly where they need to throw the football first and foremost, but it looks like they're still going to utilize the running back position. Junkins is the Browns running back to start until further notice. And like I said, I am recording this before Monday Night Football, so if you get a major injury or something crazy to one of the Lions running backs, I'll have a pinned comment down below, but this is what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis as long as everyone's healthy. You start Gibbs no matter what. I know it's a tough matchup here against the Browns, but you got to roll with him. He has that, pass-catching upside. And David Montgomery, I think, is always startable, can always find the end zone, can always bring you a floor. Could be a little bit limited in the matchup here, but once again, this is a home game for the Lions, so I feel pretty good about both Gibbs and Monty here in week 4. All right, moving into the later window on Sunday, we're going to start with the Jaguars traveling to face the 49ers. Let's start with the Jags side of things. Travis Etienne saved his week 3 stat line with a late touchdown, had 56 yards on the ground, 11.6 fantasy points. Once again, this was a weird kind of game script, low scoring. Both teams needed to throw the football. Just not a great spot for Etienne, even though the matchup was pretty good, right? This is a tough matchup this week against the Niners, coming in top 7 against the run. I know Bosa's, presumably out for the year and everything, but I think you still got to start Travis Etienne. I mean, he's getting, the volume in this backfield. He's been a solid start all year long. I got no reason to really bench Etienne here in week 4, especially with the way this passing offense looks for the Jags. I think Bashaw Tutin is one of my favorite handcuffs. Like we've talked a lot about Tutin over the past 2 weeks. He does have some standalone value, did score a touchdown this past week, had a touchdown in week 2, but only 6 touches, 8.1 fantasy points. I'm not going out of my way to start him on the road against, a Robert Saleh-led defense that will still be pretty good against the run. I think we can all agree. So Etienne, good start. Tutin, good player to roster, but I'm not starting him this week. Then, we don't need to break down Christian McCaffrey like extensively or anything. 24 fantasy points in week 3. 15 targets, 10 catches, just 52 yards on the ground. But what's nice to see here is whether it's Brock Purdy at quarterback or if he's out and it's Mac Jones, Mac Jones is going to at least throw the football to Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey only has 1 touchdown on the season, and he has had 23.2 or more fantasy points in every game because he's so involved in the passing game. If you own him, you got to feel good. Niners are at home. But at the same time, I will point out this Jaguars defense has been quietly good, and their run defense is good, ranking top 5 in terms of the fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs. So don't overthink it, though. I mean, I'm just pointing out it's a tough matchup on paper. You guys might not realize that the Jags have been a good defense this year, but it's still Christian McCaffrey. You're still starting him. Let's move right along. Next up, we have the Colts traveling to face the Rams, and Jonathan Taylor, an absolute must-start running back regardless of matchup. and this is a tough matchup. The Rams defense has allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs on the year. But Jonathan Taylor's coming off a game where he had 32.8 fantasy points and 3 touchdowns, over 100 rushing yards. 29.5 fantasy points the week before, 12.8 in week 1. He's the RB1 in fantasy football in both half PPR and full PPR. Doesn't matter. You got to roll with him, even on the road in a tough matchup. I will point out, I think his ceiling could be a little bit limited this week. He's certainly not going to do what he did this past week, but he's still a must-start running back, and we will leave it at that. This is a pretty easy matchup. Kyren Williams, another running back who's always a must-start running back, regardless of matchup for me. And the Colts defense kind of quietly good. They're kind of middle of the pack against opposing running backs, but Kyren coming off of a good week, 19.2 fantasy points, 94 yards on the ground, found the end zone off a receiving touchdown. You got to keep him in your starting lineups. The floor is always safe. He's always a must-start running back for me on a week-to-week basis. We have seen, Blake Corum start to get a little bit more volume. He had 8 touches this past week, but I'm not really worried about it. Honestly, I still think Kyren Williams owns this backfield. He's had 17 or more touches and 2 or more targets in every game so far on the season. So I'm still good with Kyren. I know he's not the most efficient. I know some of those red zone touches have gone to Blake Corum in the past 2 weeks, but still Kyren is a very strong start as we approach week 4. All right, next up we have the Bears traveling to face the Raiders. This is an interesting matchup. Let's go ahead and start with the Bears side of things. And I think DeAndre Swift is startable in this matchup. I have a tough time putting him any higher than that. I think he's going to be a flexible running back, a low-end RB2 all season long, but it's kind of worrisome if he doesn't score a touchdown, what type of stat line you're looking at. This past week against the Cowboys, had 33 yards on the ground and 3 catches for 45 yards, and really the receiving work saved his stat line at the end of the day, but he only got you 10.8 fantasy points, so we're not really seeing a ton of volume to anybody else here. I know Kai Monangai had 7 rushing attempts in week 2 and 6 this past week, a couple targets, but it still feels like it's Swift's backfield, right? So I don't know. I think he's startable, but the Raiders have been pretty good against the run, ranking top 10 in terms of fantasy points allowed. So this is a good run defense in the Raiders, and the Bears are on the road here. So Swift, startable. I'm not considering anybody else on this Bears roster startable going into week 4. And then I have Ashton Jeanty as a sit. Okay, I do. But I do have a concern here that this is a really good matchup. The Raiders are at home. The Bears' run defense has been god-awful. They were surprisingly okay, or at least better than I think a lot of people expected against the Cowboys, but they're still a bottom 6 unit against the running back position on the season in terms of fantasy points allowed. So, Ashton Jeanty's still getting the volume. He had 17 touches this past week. The Commanders' run defense has been quietly pretty good. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to bench Jeanty, and I don't blame you, and I think it's probably the right call. But I just won't be surprised if maybe we get actually a decent stat line out of Jeanty based on the matchup. But if you guys are watching the Raiders right now, you're going to see Ashton Jeanty is getting hit behind the line of scrimmage a lot with the ball in his hands. He's not playing great in terms of pass protection. So there's a couple aspects here that are not helping Ashton Jeanty. The offensive line, and I think his pass blocking for the most part, and that is allowing Zamir White to get a little bit of involvement. Dylan Love and Raheem Mostert was inactive in week 3. Those guys aren't really getting a ton of. The surprising thing to me has been Zamir White getting any type of involvement on this offense. But, it is still Jeanty's backfield. So if you guys have nothing better, the matchup is there. I do believe that you can still start Ashton Jeanty in week 4. But if you guys have other options you feel better about, I think it is also okay to sit him. And with 7.4 or less fantasy points in the last 2 weeks and just 12 fantasy points in week 1, I think he is still a player with a low ceiling right now. The matchup is there. You guys just really got to take a hard look at your roster if you're considering Jeanty in week 4. All right, to wrap up the afternoon slate, we have maybe the best game of the whole week. The Ravens traveling to face the Chiefs. And as I always say, I'm recording this before Monday Night Football, so I'm sorry if something crazy happens to Derrick Henry, but as long as Derrick Henry is healthy, you were starting him every single week. No matter what happened the previous week, if he's healthy, you got to have him in your starting lineup. And the Chiefs' run defense has been a little softer than I think some people realize. They just gave up a big game to Cam Scatabo. They're kind of middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed. So as long as Derrick Henry is healthy, you got to roll with him. You got to start him, and everybody else on this roster at running back is nothing more than a handcuff until further notice. When it comes to the Chiefs running backs, I had them all as sits this past week. Just couldn't trust them, but I did talk about they're facing the Giants. I won't be surprised if somebody scores here. This run defense is awful, and we did see a rushing touchdown to Kareem Hunt, but he only had 11.4 fantasy points even with scoring. Pacheco was okay on the ground. Once again, not a bad matchup, 4.5 yards per carry, but 5.8 fantasy points. We saw a slight involvement to Brashard Smith, and Elijah Mitchell was out this past week. So he's been out since week 2, but his name's on the screen. I'm sorry. But yeah, I just can't do it. I can't. I mean, I don't fear this Ravens run defense at all. It's a home game for the Chiefs. It's going to be like one of these games where all eyes are on the Chiefs again. They didn't look great in week 3. They just played the Giants. You know what I mean? I'm not surprised I got the win, but I can't do it with the Chiefs running backs. I don't want these guys in my starting lineups. I just don't. If you guys are absolutely desperate, you're in a deeper format, these guys are floating around on the waivers because nobody else wants them, you need a dart throw. It is a good matchup. The Ravens run defense has not been good this year. You could throw one of these guys in there as a low-end RB2. If I had to take one or the other, you're really flipping a coin. You are, between Pacheco and Hunt every single week. The split has basically been 50-50 all year long. I'm just staying away if I can. But like I said, if you're in a 14-team league, your RBs are all injured, you need a dart throw, you could take the matchup. But come on, majority of us, we got to sit these Chiefs running backs in week 4. All right, Sunday Night Football, we're going to have the Packers traveling to face the Cowboys. Should be an interesting matchup, a little revenge game for Micah Parsons. We'll see how he impacts the running backs in this matchup. But let's start with the Packers side of things. Josh Jacobs, always a solid start, always a safe floor. Still found a way to have 12.4 fantasy points in a tough matchup on the road against the Browns this past week. Had 9 targets, which is nice to see. 5 catches, 44 receiving yards. Didn't score a touchdown, but got enough involvement in the passing game that, he was still solid, and that's what he is every single week. But, yeah, this is a great spot against the Cowboys defense. Don't let the Bears' performance this past week fool you. This Cowboys run defense is just awful. The Bears just threw the football a lot and were successful with it, so the Cowboys have moved up in terms of their ranking, but this is a bad Cowboys defense all around, and they're bad against the run. Solid spot for Josh Jacobs. He should have, he could arguably have his best game of the season. I think this is his best matchup of the season so far. And I'm not worried about Josh Jacobs not scoring this past week, and I am not worried about this Cowboys defense at all. So I'm headed straight to Underdog to take the over on Josh Jacobs to score a touchdown in week 4 of the season. Don't forget, guys, all new users who sign up on Underdog using promo code THECATCH, that link is down below. We're getting a free Week 4 NFL Pick Em. Take that free Pick Em. Take Jacobs to score a touchdown, and if both of those lines hit, you'll automatically double your cash entry. And Underdog has a new exclusive offer to anyone who signs up using promo code THECATCH. Once you play through $5 on Underdog, you're going to automatically receive $50 in bonus cash to use towards Week 4 NFL action. And on top of that, Underdog's also going to give you a 50% deposit match up to $1,000. So make sure you guys sign up using promo code THECATCH. That link is down below to take advantage of all of Underdog's Week 4 exclusive NFL offers. Javonte Williams saved you, at least because he had involvement in the passing game, 12.2 fantasy points. Loved him last week. Was one of my favorite players last week. And towards the end of the game, he had, he was down at the 1 yard line right off of that reception, and could have potentially scored and had a much better day like we were expecting. Did have a lost fumble as well, which didn't help, and all that. But I'm not going to overreact here. Still think Javonte Williams is a solid start. It is a tough matchup against the Packers run defense. And once again, I think they're going to be kind of humming with Micah Parsons in this matchup. Going to be fired up and everything. And, we are still seeing some increased volume to Miles Sanders. Nobody else here is really relevant between Jadon Blue and Phil Maffa. Their names are still, I probably need to update some of these slides and everything, but just so you guys can see the roster, I guess is interesting. But yeah, Javonte, good start this week. I think he's still a player that needs to be in starting lineups as like a low-end RB2. But once again, could have had a much better week 3, almost scored, and has still been really, really solid this year. So I still like Javonte, even in a tough matchup. Josh Jacobs got to be a must start here in week 4. All right, moving into Monday Night Football, we have 2 Monday Night Football matchups here in Week 4. First one's going to be the Jets traveling to face the Dolphins. What do we do with this Jets backfield? Breece Hall just 9.2 fantasy points this past week, and we saw a little bit more involvement out of Braylon Allen. But really, what do we make of the Jets offense right now? Don't know if Justin Fields or Tyrod Taylor is going to be the starting quarterback at the time of recording this. I don't really know if it matters too much here. I think Fields is probably going to be cleared. It's a later game, Monday Night Football, so I think he'll probably be good to go, even if it's a later announcement in the week. But, I mean, we look at this matchup, right? It's the Dolphins. They've been awful against the run, so I think Breece Hall is still very startable here, maybe even close to a start just based on the matchup. But the Jets are on the road here, so Breece Hall, perfectly fine, low-end RB2, desperation flex option. But yeah, the past 2 weeks have just not been great, and this Jets offense hasn't been very good. So Breece Hall, startable. I'm not going to say Braylon Allen's in that area yet. He's nothing but a handcuff with some standalone value to me. Devon Achane, solid start every single week. You got to roll with them no matter what. The Jets are still bottom 12 against opposing running backs in fantasy points allowed. Achane has 16.1 or more fantasy points in every game this year. You got to feel good if you own Devon Achane. You got to keep rolling with them. Ollie Gordon, increased volume in week 3, did score a touchdown. Very strong handcuff to own if something happens to Achane. And I mean, I don't know if we can count on that volume he got this past week in week 4, and even with scoring the touchdown, only had 9.8 fantasy points. So I like Ollie Gordon, worth picking up. It'll be interesting once Jalen Wright is back and healthy. Or actually, he was actually healthy this past week. That's right. He just didn't play at all. So, I mean, I guess that's good for Ollie Gordon, but maybe Wright starts to get some volume here as well. But yeah, for now, Gordon's nothing more than a handcuff. And A-Chain, definitely a solid must-start player in week 4. All right, to wrap up the week, last game is going to be the Bengals traveling to face the Broncos. Chase Brown. I had such high hopes for you, Chase Brown. I really thought Chase Brown could be a top 5 running back on the 2025 season. And I don't know. I mean, anything's possible. There's a long season left ahead of us, but 6 fantasy points in week 3, 8.5 in week 2. He had a fumble in week 3. I'm just not feeling great about Chase Brown. I still think he's startable. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be tough to move him out of like the RB2 spot. You drafted this guy more than likely as an RB1, maybe an RB2. But yeah, Jake Browning was absolutely abysmal in week 3. They're turning the football over a lot. They're putting themselves in situations where the run game starts to go out the window. They need to throw more. The offensive line is awful, and they're facing the Broncos on the road here. I do not like when teams have to travel to Denver and play. This Broncos defense is going to be absolutely humming. I know they haven't necessarily been great against a run this year, but you still got to, feel better about the Broncos defense overall than the running back position for the Bengals here in week 4, just given the circumstances. So he's startable, but startable with caution. And I mean, he had 5 targets this past week with 4 catches. So that is encouraging. Like, even in these bad game scripts, maybe we're going to see him get that involvement. But he was also only on the field for 55% of snaps. Pirine on the field for 27% of snaps, and Taj Brooks on the field for 18% of snaps. So once again, some of these games where it gets out of hand, like you can see more backups get volume and all that. But yeah, I don't feel as enthusiastic about Chase Brown going into week 4 as I have in prior weeks. We'll see what happens. All right, J.K. Dobbins remains a start, and this is one of those things that I just got right in the preseason. Didn't get everything right, certainly, but my belief was always that Dobbins would get the bulk of the carries for the Broncos, especially early in the season, and that is just not changing. I mean, don't get me wrong. RJ Harvey has been on the field for 29% of snaps or more, and like every now and then we see like Tyler Batty or somebody get involved, but Dobbins is the guy here. He's had a touchdown in 3 straight games. He's had 63 or more rushing yards in 3 straight games and at least a catch in every game this year. You gotta love this spot for Dobbins going up against the Bengals, who've given up the most fantasy points to opposing running backs on the season. He's an absolute must-start player. Love him here in week 4 at home in a game where the Broncos are probably going to get ahead and be running the football. Dobbins is a smash start in week 4. RJ Harvey, just 2 carries this past week, 3 catches off of 3 targets. Nothing there for us in fantasy. Dobbins, an absolute must-start player as we wrap up week 4. And there you guys have it. Every single matchup, every single player, and who you should be starting or sitting at the running back position. Don't forget, guys, I will answer as many fantasy football questions as I possibly can throughout the week. So drop them in the comment section down below. I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. And while you're down there, it does me a huge favor if you guys go ahead and hit that subscribe button on the way out. And this is all we do here all year long, free fantasy football content. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button on the way out. And when the videos and playlists pop up on the screen, go check out all of our other week 4 content. We're going to have everything you could possibly need to dominate this week of fantasy football and every single week as the season progresses. So with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.